The young man firmly declares he has made up his mind to do everything possible to prevent anyone from suffering unfairly or being humiliated. He vows to stop the engagement annulment, no matter the cost. A girl with blue hair tearfully calls him Oni-sama, believing he is destined to become yet another legend in this world. The narration questions if the prince's attendant is secretly saving someone, revealing that the attendant is actually an ally of villainy. The young man stands resolute, gripping a glowing sword, as the story hints at his hidden role. The young man is described as an undeniable legend, his determined gaze emphasizing his significance. The text highlights the difficult circumstances surrounding Attendant A, setting the stage for the challenges ahead. The sound of grinding gears echoes in the young man's mind, a persistent noise that has followed him as long as he can remember. It creeps in during unexpected moments or when he faces uncertainty at crossroads. Each time he hears it, he is compelled to stop and think deeply, reflecting on his path and choices. The world feels like a puppet show, crafted by an unseen hand. We are mere puppets, moved by invisible strings and watched from above. Are our lives just scenes in someone's grand design? The grinding of gears echoes ominously over a grand building as a voice shouts, "I can't take it anymore." A young man boldly declares the annulment of his engagement to Adrian, pledging loyalty only to Lady Crystal. He introduces himself as Edward, the first prince, his voice firm and resolute. Another voice affirms his declaration with unwavering support. In a formal meeting, a young man raises his hand, drawing attention. He introduces himself as Roland Valerie Oriole, his expression serious yet uncertain. The room reacts with surprise as the gears continue to turn overhead, symbolizing the weight of the moment. Roland reveals he was born with the distinctive blessing of Oriole. Azure hair and violet eyes, colors that mark a hero throughout history. At his birth, it was declared a hero had been born after hundreds of years. For the first time in 30 years, the legendary Holy Sword Belgrande is said to have descended from the heavens. The crowd erupts in awe as a legend becomes reality. The legendary Holy Sword, said to be wieldable only by heroes, is shown as a young boy effortlessly holds it. Yet in this peaceful era, dragons are endangered and even the Demon King lives quietly. The Holy Sword has become nothing more than a useless relic. The Sword Belgrande is now a spectacle displayed in a temple to draw crowds and offerings. The narrator reveals he is the eldest son of the Duke Oriole family, a powerful lineage rivaling the royal family. He is also Edward, the first prince's childhood friend and trusted confidant, a significant presence in the royal court. Edward admits he has become nothing more than a sycophant, just attendant as shocked. He questions if he really said, engagement annulment. He confidently declares they have found proof that Adrian tried to frame Lady Crystal. He calls on everyone to support them for the sake of Crystal and himself, announcing the day to settle Adrian's wrongdoing will be at the graduation party 6 months from now. The group responds with fervent agreement, shouting, "Of course, Your Highness." Edward warns that Adrian has likely extended her influence to their fiancés, and those foolish enough to be swayed by her wickedness must be cast aside without hesitation, urging everyone to follow his lead. Edward, overwhelmed and clutching his head, wonders how things have come to this. He reflects that the plan was supposed to be foolproof and has instructed everyone not to speak about the engagement annulment yet. Though something still feels off, the prince and his closest confidants stand determined, aware that it's only a matter of time before everything unravels. Elena Qualiart, the all-purpose maid of the Oriole household, appears and gently asks if Edward has finally come to his senses. She explains she entered quietly through the ceiling to avoid disturbing him. Edward, startled, asks when she arrived and why she is there. Elena questions Edward about what he thinks when he looks at her. Noting his maid uniform looks freshly washed, she points out the ribbon in his hair is the one she gave him 5 years ago and asks if he changed his perfume. Embarrassed, Edward apologizes, but Elena quickly thanks him for taking good care of it all this time and rushes off to fetch Lady Ruin. Edward watches her leave, puzzled and wondering why Ruin is involved. A young woman urgently calls out to her brother, asking if he has truly come to his senses. She grabs his shoulders, pressing him for an answer about what he thinks of Prince Edward, the young heirs of influential noble families in his circle, and Baroness Crystal. The young man responds quietly, caught off guard by her intensity. He hesitates, then admits the prince is a fool and the nobles around him are like lemmings boarding a sinking ship. The woman agrees, saying Lady Crystal is just a victim forced to bear the ideals of a love-struck prince and self-absorbed nobles. Despite this, she's relieved he has come back to his senses, though she warns he realized it far too late. A caption reveals this woman is Ruin, Roland's cousin and now his younger sister by title. Ruin scolds the young man for being influenced by fools, recalling how strange it was that he constantly praised Lady Crystal while complaining about Lady Adrian. She reminds him how worried everyone was over the past 6 months. The young man reflects silently, wondering why he lost himself like that. Ruin asks him to explain what happened. A flashback begins. 1 year ago, Lady Crystal transferred to their academy, and Prince Edward fell for her at first sight, despite his fiancée, Lady Adrian, already being chosen by the king. For a prince to fall for a mere baron's daughter was unthinkable, but he relentlessly pursued her. The scene shifts to a tense meeting where the nobles fear disaster if Duke Gerardiel learns of this. The flashback sets the stage for the conflict that followed. The young man sighs, bracing himself for what's coming next. A close observer reflects on Prince Edward's impulsive and emotional nature, something familiar since childhood. The prince's fervent praise for Lady Crystal over his fiancée Adrian is recalled, with Edward once declaring to his father that Adrian pales in comparison. The scene shifts to a stately building, underscoring the ongoing cycle of events. A flashback reveals Prince Edward at 8 years old, boldly proclaiming that Roland is far more charming than Adrian and demanding Roland be made his official wife. The narrator, also 8 then, watches in shock. Edward's seriousness about this absurd request leads him to formally present it to the king and queen, simply because he dislikes his fiancée. When told it's impossible due to his gender, Edward defiantly insists the law be changed, causing panic in the narrator. The narration shifts to a more recent time, describing Edward as bold and decisive if seen positively. Though his stubbornness may seem selfish, it's reliable when leading a nation. Still, the prince has many flaws, prompting the gathering of talented individuals, including the narrator, to compensate. Despite efforts, Edward has become exactly what the narrator sought to prevent. She explains that to marry Lady Crystal, they made Lady Adrian the villain and devised Prince Edward's outrageous plan to break off his engagement. Even Oni-sama and the entire salon supported it. Another woman adds that other young noblemen also became infatuated with Lady Crystal, and following the prince's lead, they accused their own fiancés of nonsense, demanding broken engagements. The young man reflects silently, overwhelmed by the hellish scene and unsure what to say. He realizes the salon members who should have stopped this are actually supporting Prince Edward. The plan is full of holes and impossible, but if the prince says so, they could easily find evidence or witnesses, real or fake, to frame Lady Adrian. This ease of manipulation is what makes the situation so frightening. The young man considers the consequences if Edward breaks off the engagement without permission. It would disgrace the aristocratic system and ruin the king's reputation. From abroad, people would think the nobility is collapsing, and at worst, it could lead to an invasion. A woman suggests that Lady Renee, sharing the same hair and eye color as the young master, is the only family member unaffected. Another woman advises that without a fiancé or engagement, Oni-sama would be the least problematic, no longer involved in this matter. The young man recalls that the hero of Oriole was just a fairy tale, but Oni-sama proved the legend real, bringing glory and people's support to the once fading Oriole Duke family. Thanks to that, he was welcomed as the adopted daughter of the main family. With their colors, however, if the hero himself joins forces with foolish nobles, he would be seen as a traitor to the people's trust and hated by them, potentially causing the country's downfall. Lady Adrian worries aloud about being lumped in with the others and treated like a witch, lamenting the misfortune of being dragged down and punished alongside them. The young man reassures her, apologizing sincerely, while reminding her that if Oni-sama hadn't come to his senses, their fate could have been the same. Now that they understand the situation, he focuses on figuring out what to do next. He proposes convincing Prince Edward and the others to change their minds and understand the consequences, preventing the foolish plan from advancing. He suggests asking everyone involved, including Lady Adrian, to sincerely apologize. The women agree that this sounds ideal, but Lady Adrian questions whether such a perfect solution is realistically possible within 6 months. The young man hesitates, unsure. Lady Adrian reflects on how even Oni-sama and the salon members initially frowned at the prince's selfishness, asking when he changed his mind. The young man admits he honestly doesn't know. It just happened without them realizing it. He wonders why everyone, including himself, became so captivated by someone they had just met. Lady Renee stands quietly, deep in thought. The woman questions the connection between Lady Crystal and the young master, believed to be the cause of the current situation. The young man explains it likely began shortly after she transferred here, recalling their first conversation when she approached him in the school building. He notes they happened to run into each other several times afterward, but it never felt like anything special. The woman ponders the significance of these repeated encounters, while Lady Adrian insists. Crystal was just a perfectly ordinary girl. He recalls moments with her, reaching for the same book in the library, helping her when she tripped, and assisting her in finding something she dropped. Slowly, the prince's infatuation seems to have spread to him, and he can't stop thinking about Crystal. He reflects quietly, admitting it's something like that. The woman doubts the story, Feeling it's too convenient for so many coincidences to align perfectly, the young man insists he doesn't know Crystal personally but finds her delicate and charming from afar. He explains their encounters always happened when he acted on impulse or randomness, concluding for now, he'll just call it coincidence. The woman points out how the salon members became fully captivated by Crystal, supporting Prince Edward, who openly claims he's in love with her. The young man finds it strange that no one felt jealous or disappointed, as everyone genuinely cheered for the couple from their hearts. He acknowledges Prince Edward knows everyone has fallen for Crystal and accepts their loyalty without doubt. This has continued for at least 6 months. They treat Edward and Crystal like main characters of a story, eliminating anyone who might interfere. It feels as if they've all been enchanted. She wonders if Lady Crystal might be using some kind of magic. He recalls that Oni-sama was blessed by Oberon and Titania, the fairy king and queen, since childhood, making him immune to magic and curses. The academy has the best anti-magic and defense barriers, plus court mages overseeing things. Still, the situation is strange enough to consider the worst-case scenario. The woman solemnly acknowledges this possibility. She questions if this is magic, fate, or a prank by an unseen god. Feeling like someone with bad intentions has set everything in motion, she urges swift, decisive action with bold courage to destroy their enemies before they themselves are destroyed. The girl affirms that Oni-sama will help those facing misfortune, and this will benefit both their country and family. They can finally deal with foolish people once and for all. She excitedly declares the plan sounds fantastic. The woman commands to swiftly take care of their enemies. The young man quietly reflects on how the women in their family think only of eliminating enemies without hesitation. He struggles with the injustice of the happiness Prince Edward envisions with Lady Crystal, built on the suffering of others, especially the innocent Lady Adrian. He quietly admits he has made up his mind, facing the 2 women and the young man behind him. A tense moment erupts inside a grand department store as a young man in a top hat and suit, holding a cane, and a woman with long flowing hair and a flower hairpin, both alert, face an unseen threat. The man shouts sharply for everyone to wait a minute, signaling the start of a hostage crisis. A man wielding a knife and shouting threats demands the women be killed, claiming he has a bomb too. The young man calmly assesses the situation, noting the bomb is likely a bluff but the weapons look real, so he warns to avoid provoking them. The woman beside him, named Gino, stands ready, confident they can handle the number of attackers. The man pleads for the violence to stop, trying to de-escalate the situation. The young man speaks about the power of communication as a bridge to understanding. Trying to reason with the aggressor, the attacker, named Igor, angrily threatens to kill the young man if he doesn't be quiet. The young man firmly commands Igor to stop, showing calm resolve despite the danger. Another man, Kirill, questions why the young man is stopping the violence, arguing that killing the nobles would set a perfect example. The young man, adjusting his messy bangs, expresses regret that the violence wasn't stopped earlier. The woman beside him, Lady Adrian, looks pained but attentive as the young man contemplates the situation and the stakes, recognizing the nobles could be used as hostages or bargaining tools. A young woman with a small top hat smiles warmly as she addresses Lady Ruin, expressing gratitude for the exhibition tickets she was given and happiness that Lady Ruin could attend. She then introduces their maid, Elena, who steps forward and formally states her name. Lady Ruin greets Prince Edward's attendant with a polite but pointed remark about the fiancé's poor memory. Noting she can't recall people's names, the attendant responds that he remembers everyone except those who don't interest him. Lady Ruin chides him for avoiding the salon for 6 months, asking if he forgot about it. She laughs as she mentions rumors of a charming individual warming her seat as if it were theirs. The attendant retorts that he has no one worth conversing with, mocking the idea of talking with the wind and gossiping. The attendant reflects that reconciling or teaming up with Lady Adrian now feels nearly impossible. The young man in the top hat admits deep regret for his past mistakes, acknowledging that even if he was out of his mind, Lady Adrian had every reason to be harsh with him. Suddenly, a man with a flat cap angrily calls out to the young man, accusing him of being a noble too. The young man hesitates, admitting only vaguely that he is. The man grumbles about nobles being carefree, which fuels his disdain. The man with the flat cap accuses the young man of never having to struggle for money or women, but the young man denies this. He explains he is from a backwater village and only started wearing proper shoes after coming to the city. He laments how miserable it feels to have no money and no women, asking if the man understands. The woman with the top hat sharply states it's obvious at a glance. No need to say it. The young man looks shocked as the confrontation continues. The young man stammers that there's no way he could possibly understand the harsh words. The woman sharply retorts that while his upbringing might warrant some sympathy, it doesn't justify resorting to crime. She insists the reason women dislike him isn't his looks but his personality, urging him to reflect on his own foolishness instead of being bitter. He winces, overwhelmed by her bluntness. A woman with long dark hair loudly agrees with the harsh assessment. A man in a flat cap angrily demands if all the women standing nearby belong to the young man. The young man, sweating nervously, asks them to keep quiet if they're worried about him. The woman with the ponytail explains that the red-haired woman may be the young master's little sister, but in truth, she harbors a much more complicated crush. The woman with the small top hat confirms this is mostly accurate. The ponytailed woman adds that as the young master's maid, she knows every secret about him and is basically his loyal hound. The red-haired woman protests, telling her to watch her wording, clarifying she means a loyal servant to the Oriole family. The young man and the red-haired woman are both uncomfortable as everyone stares at them. The man in the flat cap wonders if the red-haired woman isn't one of the women involved. The ponytailed woman explains that nobles stab and get stabbed in return, exchanging formalities while occasionally stabbing each other with words, calling it a disgraceful relationship. The young man yells for Elena, clearly provoked. The man in the flat cap screams for the young man to stop provoking him, while the young man demands enough of this conversation, overwhelmed and flustered. A man with a flat cap shouts for the others to shut up and die, swinging his sword aggressively. The young man in the top hat pleads to talk things out, confused about how the situation escalated. A bearded man in armor orders to stop the attackers again. Recalling the boss had stopped them earlier, the young man's companions urgently ask their older brother to handle the situation quickly, while the armored man grimly realizes their enemies are now united in trying to bring them down. The women insist this trouble doesn't require intervention from the boss or the older brother, surprising the young man. The young man sighs, accepting there's no other choice, and grips a sword tightly. He shouts a warning to wait just a moment as he charges forward, his true power about to be revealed, while a woman calls out to stop him. The young man, sweat beading on his face, is scolded for his reckless plan to face an armed group armed only with a cane, which is deemed utterly insane. Two serious figures, an older man and a woman with a ponytail, watch him with concern. The woman with the ponytail sternly explains they were fortunate to apprehend the culprits without injury, but any slight mistake could have led to disaster. The young man bows his head, listening intently as the older man and the woman stand nearby, weapons at rest. The young man worries about how to calm the woman, who remains agitated. The older man advises him not to show displeasure to a lady. The woman sharply commands him to stop looking around, startling him into compliance. The woman lectures the young man on the importance of ensuring his own safety, reminding him that he carries the weight of many subjects and citizens on his shoulders. The young man acknowledges her words, though he struggles with the harshness of the reprimand, while the woman watches him with a mix of sternness and concern. They wonder if Prince Edward grew tired of constant lectures. Noting he was spoiled growing up, Lady Ruin addresses Lady Adrian, confessing she was captivated by how gallant her brother-in-law looked when he swiftly incapacitated the ruffians. The ladies saved from danger gaze at the young master with misty eyes. They agree it's a difficult world where a hero can be scolded by the princess he saved. Lady Adrian questions what they're speaking about so casually. The older man explains the young master reflexively raised his cane, deflecting a blade which hit an accomplice's foot, causing a domino effect that led to their capture. She challenges if the favorable result justifies ignoring the process. Lady Ruin insists it wasn't chance but her brother-in-law's calculations all along. Lady Adrian, surprised, asks if the royal fencing instructor and captain of the royal guard planned everything. The young master nervously admits it was sort of planned. The young master reflects on his destiny as a true chosen hero, naturally gifted with powers rivaling dragons and demon lords. Though he has used these abilities a few times, he was fortunate to be born in a peaceful era where fighting was unnecessary. He admits that even if he claims to have handled the armed group through careful calculation, most of it remains undisclosed to avoid confusion. Lady Ruin listens thoughtfully, intrigued by the stories. She eagerly declares her brother-in-law has many wonderful anecdotes, encouraging others to believe him. The tale unfolds. When the brother-in-law was just 9 years old, he single-handedly defeated 5 assassins targeting the prince. Lady Adrian is shocked, demanding to know if this is true. Lady Ruin explains that such a story was kept secret to protect the royal family's reputation, issuing a gag order despite it being common knowledge among insiders. She recalls the excited young prince nearly spreading the news everywhere, while the young master awkwardly acknowledges the praise with a self-aware expression. Lady Adrian finds it hard to believe and asks if she is familiar with the Dronzer Rebellion incident that happened 5 years ago in the Demon Lord's territory. The young man nervously agrees. The woman begins to share another story, raising her hand as she speaks. The narration explains the Dronzer Rebellion incident involved the Demon Lord, once humanity's nemesis. Now living peacefully in a neighboring country, dissatisfied, the demon race rebelled to form an independent nation. Lady Adrian confirms her knowledge, recalling foreign troops suppressed the coup before it succeeded, and that this is how it appears on the surface. It is revealed that at the secret request of the current demon lord and the great temple of the Holy Church, the young master single-handedly suppressed the rebel army in secret. This operation is a state secret, known only to a select few. The young man worries aloud that even if he told the truth, no one would believe it easily. The woman smirks confidently, suggesting they should stop casually discussing state secrets or risk being charged with a crime. The young man is taken aback, and the woman scoffs at him with a knowing smile. The woman eagerly suggests discussing the incident 2 years ago when the great beast Behemoth rampaged during an exhibition in the royal capital. Noting the young man's brother-in-law heroically saved the prince's sister, Lady Adrian recognizes the scandalous rumor about Princess Rosaline and Lord Roland's passionate affair, which was widely known. The maid excitedly adds that the story was even in newspapers, so Lady Adrian must have heard of it. The young man reflects that the public only remembers the love affair rumor. While the incident was later declared a fabricated story in a gossip magazine, he recalls how, to protect spectators from the rampaging behemoth, he summoned Belgrand and sliced the creature in half. Despite this, the event attracted much attention due to its location. The tale was about to be celebrated as Brave Roland's heroic tale. But the gossip magazine's love affair report gained more attention. The maid explains Princess Rosaline fell for the brother-in-law's heroism, causing the rumor to spread. The young man reacts with surprise, caught off guard by the gossip's impact. Suddenly, the woman forcibly silences the maid, revealing that Princess Rosaline unilaterally broke off her engagement with the prince of a neighboring country. Lady Adrian questions the engagement, but the woman dismisses it as nothing. The young man internally admits the word engagement is forbidden now, explaining the princess arbitrarily declared it broken and began stalking him. Meanwhile, another girl watches anxiously from a distance, noting the princess is isolated under the pretext of recuperating from illness. The story of the hero defeating Behemoth, once the beginning of it all, vanished along the way to protect the royal family's dignity. A protest declared the love affair report a gossip fabrication. He wonders what the prince's siblings are thinking, recalling how the prince's sister spiraled before Prince Edward. Lady Adrian coughs and begins, mentioning the renowned absolute champion Roland, who won the royal capital swordsmanship tournament 4 years running. Rosaline admits she's heard of him but prefers not to mention the embarrassing title, though she acknowledges it's believable. She recalls that in the previous tournament, Prince Edward's confidence dominated the podium, and the prince must have felt proud placing medals on the top 3. The festival's long history of 200 years makes this natural, and she heard it was lively, with the prince and others looking presentable. The young man wonders if she suspects the event was rigged. Rosaline asserts that without the title of prince, Edward has no charm, warning that the salon's people must carefully choose their alliances or risk losing status. As she speaks, Lady Renee announces the arrival of Lady Adrian's escort. Rosaline bids everyone farewell, suggesting a leisurely chat with Lady Renee another time. He notes that Miss Adrian's distrust toward the prince's associates is far worse than he expected. Though he and Adrian never interacted much, their childhood relationship was actually quite good. He wonders if it's possible to restore that kind of relationship, but acknowledges they are to blame for her strong dislike. He struggles with the idea of bowing to the prince without her consent, feeling uncertain about what to do next. The group reflects on their failure to convey Prince Edward's greatness, only stirring more complaints and anticipating a difficult path ahead. The focus shifts to a determined woman stepping forward, her expression serious as she utters, "What now?" The question hangs heavily, inviting deeper reflection on the true meaning behind recent events. A maid announces to Lady Adrian that a get-well flower arrangement has arrived from Lord Roland and Lady Renee. The maid contrasts this with the fact that they have yet to receive even a token get-well gift from His Highness Edward. Lady Adrian sips her tea calmly, her expression unreadable. Lady Adrian responds that it can't be helped. They are supposed to have not been there at that place. She remains composed, but her eyes reveal a hint of sadness or frustration. A flashback reveals 7-year-old Edward shouting at 7-year-old Adrian, calling her his fiancée but insulting her as an ugly, slant-eyed girl with flashy hair color. The scene is set in a grand building, emphasizing their noble status. The flashback continues with young Edward expressing his dislike for red-headed women, calling them strong-willed. Adrian, standing quietly, reflects that this is why her grandfather brought her to the royal palace. Edward angrily demands she stop speaking and declares he doesn't want to be engaged to such a low-class woman, while an older man tries to calm him down. A young noble arrogantly suggests giving the girl to his younger brother Jeremy, but a furious older man roars at him, calling him a fool. The girl clenches her fists, struggling to contain her frustration. The older man, revealed as the girl's grandfather, angrily demands respect for his precious granddaughter and lashes out at the young noble. A man nearby nervously apologizes to the duke, trying to calm the situation. The young noble defiantly threatens the first prince, but the duke retorts fiercely, mocking his lack of succession rights and comparing him to a commoner. The prince is shocked and yells for Edward to stop. The duke refuses to give his granddaughter to a man with poor judgment and a rotten personality, declaring they will reject the engagement. The young noble and another man plead for calm, but the girl demands her father apologize too, escalating the tension further. The girl silently seethes, thinking her father is a boring man as she apologizes quietly. The man laments being drawn in by the phrase royal palace, expecting a grand castle with a prince like in fairy tales, but finds it surprisingly modest. She notices a tree outside and thinks it looks good for climbing. Despite her noble status, she prefers playing outside to putting on airs. Suddenly, a boy approaches, greeting her as a beautiful princess. He introduces himself as Roland, the only child of the Duke of Oriol, and politely asks for her name. She reacts with surprise at his sudden appearance. The girl blushes, thinking Roland is cute and exactly the kind of development she had hoped for. So different from the dim-witted prince she met earlier. She formally introduces herself as Adrienne, granddaughter of Duke Gerardier, and expresses honor in meeting him. Roland cheerfully replies that the pleasure is his. Roland points out the tree Adrienne was eyeing earlier, warning that its top is withered and dangerous. He offers to show her other trees that are easier to climb. He adds that she probably wouldn't want to stay in a place like this either. Adrienne watches him closely as he confidently admits he's also good at tree climbing. A hand reaches out gently, and a girl shyly asks to join. She reflects on how wonderful Lord Roland is. The maid beams with joy, holding a bouquet of flowers, amazed that he even sent her flowers, a mere maid, along with a card and cake. The girl responds softly, surprised but pleased. A young man praises Roland for gallantly saving him from thieves, calling him strong and cool. A true gentleman, the maid laughs nervously, while the girl quietly agrees. She recalls thinking Roland might be all right back then, but now sees him as just the dim-witted prince's attendant, weak and controlled by a baron's daughter. The maid reads a letter, relieved that Sophia is doing well, but admits worry after recent events. The girl thinks Roland is far from a gentleman. A man pleads for belief in their son's potential and future education, explaining how the king's enthusiasm moved his father to accept an engagement that almost fell through. The girl sighs, acknowledging her grandfather's keen insight and regrets not refusing then. Roland is called out by a smiling young man who heard from his father about Roland single-handedly crushing a group of thieves at the Lost Bell department store. Roland listens in surprise as the young man proudly praises him in a lively classroom filled with students. A young man nervously denies something, but another insists, explaining that the reason for the panic is that they were not supposed to be at Lost Bell department store the day before yesterday. He warns that if it became public knowledge that robbers were easily allowed inside, endangering the children of ducal houses, the Lost Bell owner's reputation would be completely ruined. The young man continues loudly, despite it being under a gag order, that if the Lost Bell family collapsed, accounting for 30% of the country's tax revenue, it would be a major problem. Another man angrily warns to never speak of this, while the young man denies being at the department store that day, suggesting a case of mistaken identity. The other man laughs off the misunderstanding and then shifts the conversation, saying he has one more thing to ask. He reveals he is thinking of giving Miss Crystal a present for the upcoming spring festival, specifically a ruby brooch, and asks for Roland's opinion. Roland internally notes that the gift is hardly little. Roland worries about ignoring his fiancée to give gifts to an unrelated woman, but decides to go along with it for now, thinking Miss Crystal might be troubled by receiving such an expensive item suddenly. The other man promises to prepare the highest quality emeralds and pearls, explaining their symbolic meanings as fulfillment of love and purity. Suitable for Miss Crystal, Roland apologizes silently, feeling he made the wrong choice. A young woman hesitantly opens a door, clutching her books tightly as she steps inside. Another girl is seen entering behind her. Meanwhile, a young man inside the room notices her arrival and softly utters. The young man, bright and cheerful, calls out loudly to the woman. "Good morning, Crystal. I've saved a seat for you again today. Come, sit next to me." She responds nervously, "Good morning, Your Highness Edward." While holding her books close, a small figure resembling a gnome rings a bell, announcing the start of class and urging everyone to take their seats. The young woman and a boy sit attentively, listening to the teacher. She reflects quietly. "I think she's cute, but I still don't feel anything now." Crystal Rita Chesty, daughter of a baron. She wonders why Crystal was suddenly elevated above others in the salon. The boy asks if something is wrong, but she dismisses it with nothing. The young man teases her. guessing she was captivated by Crystal's beauty, adding it's not admirable to stare at women. The boy thinks to himself how terrifying it is that he was seriously following this guy until recently. The young man resolves to investigate her situation once more, deciding to have Elena double-check when he returns home. His expression tightens with concern as he clutches a book. Meanwhile, the maid Elena pushes a tea cart quietly through a room filled with books. Her face serious and focused, the thought crosses his mind in a dark caption. Where did Elena go dash? Laughter echoes as a young man sits on his bed, gazing out the window of a grand castle. The room is filled with books and mysterious objects, while a hand pulls back the curtain, revealing the outside world. A caption explains that Roland, the prince's attendant, secretly works to prevent the prince's fiancé Adrian from reconciling with him, while a maid named Elena infiltrates a certain place on Roland's orders. Outside, two boys meet on a garden path. One calls out to the other, who turns with a surprised expression. The boy in the vest recognizes the other as Jeremy and mutters his name quietly. Noting it's him again, they glance toward a window where a shadowy figure watches silently. Jeremy urges Roland to hurry, grabbing his arm. Roland nervously agrees. Glancing back toward the window, Jeremy complains about the constant silent surveillance, calling it creepy. Roland looks uneasy as he follows Jeremy away, while the shadowy figure remains behind the curtain, watching. Inside, Jeremy, the second prince and younger brother of Edward, is shown with a serious expression. Below him, Constance, his fiancée, appears worried and tense. The scene emphasizes their connection and the tense atmosphere surrounding them. In a richly decorated room filled with stacks of books, a young man sits in a chair while a maid stands nearby, her posture formal and reserved. A woman with a bow in her hair watches quietly. The reflection of the young man's face appears in a teacup, hinting at his contemplative mood. The maid, sweating nervously, delivers a detailed report about the recent incident at Lost Bell department store. She confirms that precautions were taken to keep their involvement secret and that the direct perpetrators have been dealt with. The young man listens calmly, seated among the books and candles. The young man questions the maid with a calm but sharp tone. She admits they are spreading rumors that Adrian's faction is harassing Crystal and are prepared to escalate to direct harm if necessary. A man in a cape emphasizes their hope that this will lead to the mutual downfall of Edward's faction. The young man warns firmly that while settling personal grudges is acceptable, they must not lose sight of their priorities. His gaze sharpens as he reminds them to focus on their main objective, underscoring the gravity of their plans and the stakes involved. The maid bows deeply, apologizing profusely and promising to meet expectations next time. The young man, seated calmly, responds with mild indifference, saying he'll wait without expecting much. Memories surface of a young girl destined to be crown princess, but she questions why she is doing this, feeling her supposed path is over. She recalls being labeled the good-for-nothing second prince's fiancé. The girl reflects bitterly that the position of the first prince's fiancé belongs to a stuck-up woman she despises. Despite her feelings, she reluctantly visits the second prince to gain favor for her family. A maid introduces herself as Constance to Prince Jeremy, who looks on with dark, unreadable eyes. From that moment, the maid senses something is off. The scene shifts to a black room filled with occult books and tools, emphasizing the prince's emotionless, murky eyes as he stands alone in the dimly lit chamber. She feels as if darkness is swallowing her whole, trapped in a suffocating void. The scene shifts to a grand room where a man remarks on how the daughter has grown close to Prince Jeremy, visiting him frequently. He laughs warmly, relieved that Jeremy, a reserved child, has found someone he can trust. Laughter echoes in a black void as a girl kneels before a boy, trapped in a fearful, master-servant dynamic disguised as an engagement. Suddenly, she notices Prince Edward approaching, breaking the oppressive silence. The girl learns that Prince Edward is infatuated with a baron's daughter and plans to marry her, a notion she finds laughably foolish. She wonders if the king knows and worries about Lady Adrian, Jeremy's fiancée, contemplating the consequences if the engagement is broken. The prince coldly admits their father remains unaware, and he intends to keep it that way. The prince taunts her, suggesting that if the two fall from grace, she will gain everything she desires. She realizes he sees right through her, despite never revealing her true self. His unsettling insight leaves her tense and unsettled. She acknowledges the man's terrifying nature, but if Prince Jeremy and Lady Adrian disappear as he claims, Jeremy will be next in line for the throne, and she will finally achieve her dream of becoming queen. She recalls how she worked tirelessly to bring about their downfall, spreading bad rumors about Adrian, though the department store incident was rushed. She admits to greedily wanting to leave even a small scar on Adrian's face and regrets hiring low-level demons. Yet, She wonders what Prince Jeremy truly thinks, noting he seems uninterested in the throne itself. Perhaps his motives are more about revenge against Prince Edward than the throne. Resolute, she decides to get what she wants regardless. Suddenly, her attention snaps to a small movement near a stack of books. Her eyes widen in shock as she notices a spider crawling nearby. She screams in fright, but the man calmly explains it's no ordinary spider. It's a magical bug used for eavesdropping. He questions who could have sent it, his expression turning serious as the spider's glowing eyes fixate on them. The man suddenly shouts that the maid who brought tea earlier is the intruder. His voice echoes as he commands everyone to catch that woman immediately. The maid, calm and composed, acknowledges that she has been found out. She turns away, pushing a tea cart down a hallway. Outside, guards shout warnings about an intruder and order not to let her escape. The maid swiftly leaps from a high ledge, her movements precise and agile. She lands gracefully, ready to evade capture. As she continues her escape, she notes that the security was surprisingly lax. She moves quickly through the castle grounds, eyes sharp and alert. The woman halts, her sharp eyes catching movement as her long ponytail sways. She calmly questions if there was a watchdog guarding the area, her stance confident and alert. Suddenly, a fierce three-headed dog snarls and growls, its intimidating presence filling the space. Her gaze sharpens, unshaken by the monstrous threat looming before her. Drawing her sword with steady hands, she declares the opponent formidable but prepares to face it head-on. She boldly requests a feast of all-you-can-eat pork and a cake piled high with cream if she returns safely at dawn, signaling her readiness for the challenge ahead. A young woman with a bandage on her cheek concludes her investigation report on the circle surrounding second Prince Jeremy. While the prince and a girl listen intently, surprised, an older man stands quietly behind her. The prince confesses his heart nearly stopped when he heard Elena was seriously injured. The woman bows deeply, gratefully accepting the promise of all-you-can-eat pork and cake for dinner. The prince urges her not to push herself too hard. The woman explains the palace security has declined, making infiltration easier. She recalls how the guard dog Cerberus grabbed her arm during the escape. Despite the difficulty, she managed to get through. She thanks the prince for the comb he gave her, which helped shake off the magical bug, though it was ruined in the process. She admits it was a careless mistake she will regret for life but is relieved it was only the comb that broke. The prince promises to replace the broken comb and thanks Elena for her hard work. Elena, overwhelmed with gratitude, declares how happy she is and relieved to be all right. The scene shifts to a quiet, elegant room where the prince reflects on the lessons learned from this mission. The woman reveals that Prince Jeremy has been secretly working to overthrow his elder brother, with his fiancée, Lady Constance, acting as his agent. She explains that Lady Adrian was merely caught in the middle, as Jeremy only invites Constance daily, leading others to mistakenly believe their relationship is good. The conversation continues, noting that no one suspects Jeremy and Constance of plotting together. It's revealed that Constance's feelings toward Adrian are deeper and darker than expected, driven by jealousy focused more on the position of the first prince's fiancée than on Adrian herself. If plans succeed, Constance would become queen. The prince explains that the two brothers have never gotten along, making Jeremy's rebellion unsurprising. Knowing Edward's infatuation with another woman, Jeremy seized the chance to rebel. The salon's people have restrained the reckless first prince. But now, except for the young master, they are ineffective love-struck fools. The time to strike is now. From Prince Jeremy and Lady Constance's perspective, if the engagement cancellation becomes reality, it would be a perfect chance to bring down both Prince Edward and Lady Adrian at once. There's also a risk their plan might harm Lady Crystal, so protection for her might be necessary. A woman reflects on recent events, relieved Lady Adrian wasn't injured. She questions the recent Lost Bell department store incident, noting how Prince Jeremy was behind it and that even if Lady Constance held a grudge, the attack went too far. The robbers' conspicuous actions and hostage-taking seem excessive if targeting Lady Adrian. The woman considers that demons dissatisfied with the current pacifist demon lord might have used the commotion to voice their dissatisfaction independently of Jeremy's instructions. Because of these independent actions, the goal was diverted and the incident didn't escalate further. An older man suggests the Dominic the young master saw might not have been a mistake after all. The man explains Lady Constance hired demons to attack the department store, targeting Lady Adrian during her visit to the exhibition. He wonders if Lord Dominic is involved in the incident. Though it's just a possibility, the attackers had multiple layers to avoid tracing back to the client. The owner of the Lost Bell department store is the family of Dominic's fiancée, Lady Edith. The question arises, what was Lord Dominic trying to do to his fiancée? The answer shocks her. He aimed to break off the engagement. If the department store scandal escalated, Dominic could legally end the engagement, possibly by supporting the robbers through leaked security information or other means, even if unaware of the full plan. Assuming this, it explains why Lord Dominic was walking alone that day and how the robbers infiltrated the priority elevator hall Lady Adrian used so precisely. The focus had been on Prince Edward's movements, but Dominic is not the only one plotting to break off engagements. Those infatuated with Crystal pose a threat, and there's no guarantee others won't act in the future. Time is short, and the urgency to act grows. Now, they consider their next steps. The plan was to monitor Prince Edward to prevent him from losing control, gather information, and seek the king's judgment. However, if this leads to the first prince being disinherited, Prince Jeremy would naturally become crown prince by moving up in line, but complications remain. The realization dawns that all the turmoil was Prince Jeremy's scheming. The first prince is unfit to rule, blinded by love, while the second prince struggles with personal grudges. By law, a woman cannot inherit the throne, complicating the royal succession. An older man warns of possible confusion over the next royal successor. A past precedent is recalled where, after the death of direct royal family members, a duke with royal blood was matched to the only remaining princess, making him the nominal king. The third princess, currently isolated due to various circumstances, is Princess Rosaline, Prince Edward's sister and Roland's stalker. A woman notes that even if she weren't isolated, she wouldn't want to call such a woman her sister-in-law. Another voice agrees. A serious warning is issued that if this situation is reported carelessly to the king, the royal family faces an unavoidable checkmate. The conversation shifts to the troubling progress of Prince Edward's engagement cancellation, which is happening covertly. The man worries that behind-the-scenes maneuvering could influence the king's judgment unfairly. Out of love for his child, the king might unknowingly support the first prince's intentions, including fabricating false charges to eliminate Lady Adrian. The woman concludes that the king's indulgence has led to this precarious state. The group agrees that if this escalates, Lady Adrian will be completely isolated, with the entire country against her. They stress the need for extreme caution. Even if they bring this to the king, they must prepare evidence to prove Lady Adrian's innocence and counter any fabricated claims that Prince Edward is seeking. Until then, they decide to keep everything confidential. A young man wonders if there is a brilliant method that could quickly resolve everything. A woman in a maid outfit suggests such a method might exist. He feels the weight of the decision, sensing something terrible could happen if they choose wrongly. Suddenly, he declares he has a solution. A woman enthusiastically proposes a method that will solve all their problems simply. The young man asks what kind of method it is. She explains that if the current royal family is useless, the custom is to select the next king from among the royalty, including the ducal houses. She points out that the Gerardier ducal house, Lady Adrian's family, has the closest bloodline to the royal family and thus the highest possibility. The young man realizes that Lady Adrian could become queen, and his brother-in-law could become king. He is surprised by this option. The maid and an older man confirm that in terms of possibility or impossibility, it is not impossible. A small girl happily agrees. The young man worries aloud that this sounds like usurping the throne and warns against saying such things even as a joke. The woman insists their first consideration must be the life and safety of the territory and people who support the royal family. She emphasizes that if the royal family becomes an obstacle in the process, it is their duty to correct this. The young man admits his pessimism despite the tempting allure of kingship, luxury, and a harem. The woman, unfazed, suggests he consider being concubine number 4, a middling position with less pressure. Two small chibi versions of them debate the merits of this rank. The young man insists that with a proper royal family, he cannot accept the reckless act of arbitrarily becoming king. The woman counters, agreeing that following the law is best, but points out loopholes, citing a precedent where someone married a princess and became the nominal king. The woman presses him, asking if he thinks the foolish first prince or the second prince aiming for rebellion should be responsible for the country's future. The young man confesses his fundamental problem. He has no desire for the throne himself. An older man smiles knowingly as the young man nervously wonders if there are better candidates than him. The woman tells her brother-in-law he is overthinking and that the throne is rolling into his lap on its own, urging him to consider it an option. The young man thinks that Gino is always soft on women and not on his side. The woman calls him an indecisive hero, while the dark-haired woman adds that everyone treats this like it's not their problem, and he must resign himself to fate. He admits that even if she says so, the hero chosen by the divine sword is surprisingly cautious and timid inside. The younger man sits with arms crossed, deep in thought, while the older one stares ahead silently. A caption questions what was supposed to be just preventing an engagement cancellation. The ridiculously large holy sword given at a young age fits perfectly in his hand, as if it were part of his body. He immediately understands he is the one chosen by this sword. The epic battle between hero and demon lord is just an old tale. In today's peaceful world, he never had to use the holy sword, until the day His Highness Edward was attacked by assassins, and he was by his side. He instantly summons Belgrand. In a flash, he wipes out all the assassins with the holy sword, leaving the area strewn with their bodies. His Highness praises his power excitedly, calling him his right-hand man. The boy feels relieved to have saved Edward and expresses gladness that he is safe before quietly entering a building alone. Later, the boy sits on the floor, staring at his trembling hands with sweat beading his face. Fear grips him as he realizes the terrifying power he holds, one capable of easily taking human lives. He turns to face a girl named Renee, who greets him with a calm yet probing smile. She calls him brother-in-law and asks what he wishes to achieve with that power. The boy hesitates, then confesses his goal: to become engaged to Lady Adrian and legally become king. His determination is clear as he speaks, though uncertainty lingers. Nearby, two women discuss the boy's challenge: how to convey his good qualities to his Highness, especially since he was completely beaten at the department store. The boy, overwhelmed, complains about the exhausting conversation, while the women remind him that the original goal was to wake up his Highness and protect Lady Adrian from an unjust engagement cancellation. They warn that the goal and means have already deviated too far from the start. The girl insists that the root of all the chaos is the love-struck prince, suggesting that if he were removed, Lady Adrian wouldn't have to spend her life with an idiot, making it a quick and happy solution. The boy sighs deeply, sitting on the couch, explaining that an engagement is absolutely impossible and he can't even reconcile with her. A woman chides him for being so passive in romance despite his popularity. Wondering if he prefers men, the boy is surprised, then nervously recalls that his Highness simply didn't like Adrian back then, and anyone but her would have been fine. He suddenly declares loudly to make Roland his official wife, shouting that he's a man. The girl reveals that rumors about the young master are indeed circulating, including a secret society selling related items. The boy, shocked, asks about the secret society and the rumors about himself. She names the group as the Secret Club Slashership, Fujoshi Love Affairs. She explains that Fujoshi refers to women who pair up gentlemen in their fantasies and engage in same-sex love creative activities. In these circles, the notation of young master / His Highness Edward means the young master is the top, the one who embraces, and His Highness is the bottom, the one being embraced. The boy screams in disbelief, questioning why. The secret club's new business is revealed: creating and secretly selling lewd doujinshi featuring the two of them. The boy panics, begging them not to do it and insisting it's impossible. The girl turns away calmly, agreeing it's impossible, while the boy looks shocked and confused. The girl named Renee firmly rejects Elena's idea, declaring she absolutely cannot agree. She insists the brother-in-law is definitely the bottom in the pairing. An image shows the boy being held by a handsome man, emphasizing that His Highness Edward / brother-in-law is the true pairing, and she won't budge on this. The boy stammers in disbelief. The boy is stunned, questioning the claim. The scene shifts to a room where the girl points accusingly while others listen. The boy examines images, denying their authenticity, but the girl and a maid argue that a beautiful confidant serving the prince is the true beauty. They say offering his entire being to the prince is the proper course. The boy blushes as the girl insists that if he's the legendary hero, he should be ready to embrace anyone, whoever they might be. She praises his cute appearance that even makes men propose to him, saying he's clearly meant to be the one who's loved. An older man pouring tea reacts with surprise, questioning the idea of embracing the prince's worries and sorrows with heart and body. An older man playfully massages the boy's head, teasing about the delicate body of the brother-in-law and the excitement he receives from His Highness. The boy winces, regretting not covering his ears sooner. Meanwhile, a woman struggles to catch her breath, overwhelmed by the conversation. Two women face off, one urging Lady Renee to call a truce, acknowledging the endless argument. The other recalls the words of the legendary masked author Christine Goda-sensei, emphasizing there's no need for a climax, conclusion, or meaning. The woman with the bandaged face declares that as long as the gentleman the other loves are united and happy, that is enough. The other woman smiles softly, admitting she had forgotten something important. The bandaged woman praises Christine Sensei for revolutionizing the industry in just over a year by introducing provocative concepts. The two agree to call a truce and postpone their discussion, with the bandaged woman affirming, "Yes, Lady Renee." A young man awkwardly asks if the conversation is over, prompting two women holding hands to recall their topic. One woman hesitantly asks what they were discussing, and the other quickly remembers it was about the engagement between the young master and Lady Adrian. The young man complains that the discussion derailed because the brother-in-law is a coward, but the women refuse to blame him. They suggest ignoring the person's will and starting to lay the groundwork by informing the Empress Dowager about the first and second prince's lack of prospects. One woman proposes quickly disposing of both princes to keep things clean and simple, causing the young man to sweat nervously and think this is becoming troublesome. The two women agree to keep that risky plan as a last resort, with one urging caution. They ask the young man to remove all dangerous options from their list. As he complies, the sound of gears clicking begins, echoing like the countdown of a time bomb, signaling the tension and stakes rising in their plotting. Firmin Gregoire Renek invites Crystal to tonight's soiree, but she humbly declines, saying it would be presumptuous for someone like her to attend. Crystal turns away, and Firmin watches her with a hesitant expression. Dominic Earhart Ilmash offers Crystal a voyage aboard his family's ship, but she politely refuses, citing seasickness. Maximilian Firmin Chaminade cheerfully suggests a relaxing vacation in his port city domain, calling out to Crystal as she walks away with Dominic and Maximilian following. Crystal apologizes to Maximilian, explaining she cannot take an extended break. Maximilian reacts with disappointment, while Crystal looks troubled. Suddenly, she calls out urgently, apologizing sincerely and stating she has an urgent matter to attend to. Crystal hurriedly excuses herself and runs down a hallway. Adolphe Rainer Charpentier laments failing to invite her again, while Estelle Louis Barbastro comments that she is completely different from women who easily give in. Estelle Louis Barbastro reflects on Crystal Rita Chesty, describing her as a fairy who has descended upon their academy, while Crystal walks forward with a determined expression. Gossiping students whisper that Crystal is approaching the young nobles again, accusing her of flirting and living a life of luxury by seducing men. Crystal sighs quietly as she stands before a grand library entrance. Alone, Crystal questions how things have come to this, her face troubled as she contemplates her situation. Suddenly, she recalls a moment of clarity. Regaining memories of her past life, she recognizes herself as Crystal, the heroine from the story Rainbow * Romanesque, staring at her reflection in a mirror and a game cover featuring her and others. She gasps in disbelief, overwhelmed by the reality of being reborn as the heroine of an otome game. Joy bursts forth as she declares victory in life this time. The exhilaration fades as she clutches her head, overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation. She struggles to accept the impossible truth. A commoner like her could never endure being a queen of a great nation, bullied by villainous characters yet still pursuing love. The pressure is unbearable, and she imagines herself collapsing under the stress. Reflecting on her past life, she recalls dying in a bathtub due to an unhealthy lifestyle, feeling pathetic. Even now, as a beautiful girl, she finds it difficult to interact with handsome guys without a screen between them. Doubt creeps in about whether events will unfold as in the original story. She resolves to avoid raising any flags. Determined to stay under the radar, she plans to avoid the Noble Academy and the main characters to prevent suspicion. Yet she senses someone manipulating events, forcing her to transfer to the Noble Academy just like in the game. Despite this, she resolves to be content with her new face and situation. She stands before a grand building, her long hair flowing as leaves drift around her. Sweat beads on her face, her eyes wide with shock as she utters a trembling W. Inside, a handsome young man adjusts his hair with a confident smile. She watches him from a window, thinking how amazing it is to see such noble sons in person. She reassures herself that as long as she avoids interacting with them, being at the same school won't be a problem. Nearby, two girls chat about the unusual pairing of Lord Dominic and Lord Roland, and she finds comfort in making friends despite her worries. Her thoughts turn to her initial fears about how things would unfold, but she admits this second life is incredibly fun. The scene shifts to the grand building again. Emphasizing her excitement, she shares a surprised look with a young man, their expressions open and curious. Suddenly, she nearly collides with the same young man in the courtyard, clutching her books tightly. Her eyes widen in shock as she exclaims, ! In surprise, caught completely off guard by the encounter. She stammers an urgent apology after nearly colliding with him, both insisting it was their fault. He stares in surprise, realizing who she is. She panics internally, denying it, while rushing away clutching her books, overwhelmed by how close he is and thinking he's practically a beautiful girl. She reflects on how dangerous the encounter was, reminding herself she must avoid capture targets at all costs. Yet, she keeps running into them everywhere, each one aggressively pursuing her. Before long, every single one has taken a liking to her. She sighs deeply as she writes, bringing the story to the present moment. At the graduation party, one or all of the 7 rainbow nobles would break off their engagements with their fiancés and pledge love to the heroine. But such an outrageous ending might work in a game, but in reality it would be catastrophic for the country. Besides, the so-called villainous characters who bully the heroine in the game are actually nice people in real life. She feels guilty, fearing that if engagement cancellations happen because of her, she'd die from guilt toward those girls. She's been desperately trying not to raise suspicion, but every effort backfires. No matter what she does, everyone falls for Crystal, The terror of having someone fall for you after just a few meetings hits hard in reality. However, one person who initially showed interest began observing her from a distance with a more analytical gaze. That person is Roland Valerie Oriole. Though she doesn't understand why he suddenly cooled off, she's grateful that even one target has been reduced. She's glad the dull transcription job isn't popular, giving her the library all to herself at this hour. Nobles avoid such a dusty place, making it a perfect hideout. Crystal reveals she's a noble in name only, from a family that bought their title 3 generations ago. She's the illegitimate daughter of her father and a traveling dancer, with minimal financial support. She must make ends meet with jobs like transcription. The harsh reality of being a heroine weighs on her. Exhausted, she decides that's enough for today. She loosens her tie, ties her hair back, and prepares to start her next task. A hand holds a sketchbook showing a detailed drawing of 2 characters in an intimate moment. The voice reflects that skills can save you, and even though it's just a hobby, the sales are surprisingly good. More importantly, there are readers eagerly waiting. The focus shifts to a young woman holding a quill pen, determined and smiling brightly. She reminds herself that what she should be doing isn't romance with handsome nobles, but working on Christine Goda's new work. She feels her writing is making gentlemen happy with each other, with her mind and pen. The scene returns to the young woman writing at a desk in a quiet room filled with books. She wonders if Lord Roland has noticed her true identity in this world. She contemplates that it might be possible because he is the legendary figure, leaving her thoughts hanging as she continues her work. 5 years ago, in the Demon Lord's autonomous territory, a young woman with horns urgently calls out to the hero of the Divine Sword, pleading to suppress the rebellion led by the Demon Grand Duke and his faction. The hero listens quietly, taken aback by the serious request. Inside a grand hall, the horned woman explains that some still cling to demon pride and try to force their will through power. She reveals that the Dorrance Demon Grand Duke's radical faction is planning a riot, urging the hero to prevent it before it starts. The hero questions if it wouldn't be better for the demons to handle their disputes themselves. The horned woman, identified as the 169th Demon Lord Yami Onyankapan-sama, listens intently. The hero's calm demeanor contrasts with the tension in the room. The hero expresses a desire to avoid unnecessary bloodshed if possible. The Demon Lord remarks on the legend that a Demon Lord coexisting with a hero has enough power to counter threats. The hero wonders aloud if the Demon Lord's side should be the one to act, while the Demon Lord responds with a dry comment about the rebellion being the hero's cue, leaving the hero slightly bewildered. The Demon Lord contemplates that she could stop the rebellion herself, but forcibly subduing her direct subordinates might provoke more resentment and lead to further uprisings. She worries that innocent bystanders could suffer unnecessary bloodshed if she acts with force. She firmly states she is not one of those old-fashioned demons who believe in suppressing others through power. She explains her preference to handle things properly by earning money and using it to keep the radicals quiet, asserting that in this age, money equates to justice. The hero quietly acknowledges the importance of money. She reveals she has already obtained permission from the Great Temple of the Holy Faith to act, but the hero protests that such decisions cannot be made alone. She insists that showing the overwhelming power of the Divine Sword hero against demons and the Demon Lord will calm the radicals. The Demon Lord stresses that those with power bear a responsibility to use it wisely, asking the hero if it is time to use his power correctly. The hero looks down at his hands, quietly reflecting on his power. The hero struggles internally, questioning what he wishes to achieve with his power. The Demon Lord watches him closely as he finally declares that he understands. The hero declares he will wield his sword if his power can help everyone live peacefully. The Demon Lord beams with approval, praising the spirit of the Divine Sword hero. She entrusts him with dealing quietly and discreetly with the Demon Grand Duke's faction, emphasizing the secrecy of the mission. The hero quietly wishes this would be the last time. The Demon Lord, floating gracefully, suggests if the hero is worried, he should spend the rest of his life with her. The hero, surprised, questions the sudden proposal. She insists that if the hero and Demon Lord join forces, no one could oppose them, and they could build an even more peaceful world. The hero questions if siding with him would make the demons resent her, prompting her to decline, calling it boring and saying she'll have to be patient. She then asks the hero to help with some paperwork. The hero, relieved, agrees but wonders if it's really okay to see the state secret documents from his country. The Demon Lord dismisses the concern, saying her subordinates are muscleheads who can't even use an abacus. The hero reflects that everyone's idea of what constitutes a state secret is arbitrary, as he begins calculating with the abacus. 1 year ago in the royal capital, a young man and woman are startled by a sudden commotion outside. The young man wonders what is happening as the noise grows louder. A maid rushes toward him, urgently addressing him as young master. The maid explains that a behemoth from the sideshow has escaped, causing chaos. The young man reacts with shock while the maid warns that if they don't act quickly, People could get hurt. The young man notes that the anti-monster security squad is being called, but doubts they will arrive in time. The young man, the woman, and the maid exchange worried glances, silently processing the gravity of the situation. Resolving to act, the young man sighs and declares he has no choice but to go stop the threat himself. As he prepares to leave, the young man asks the maid, Elena, to explain the situation to the sideshow owner. Elena and the woman wish him good luck. The young man reflects that it has been a while since he last summoned the divine sword, recalling the time he suppressed the Doran's Grand Duke's rebellion. A maid urgently calls out to Princess Rosaline, guiding her quickly through narrow streets. The princess responds with a determined yes. Following closely, suddenly, someone warns her to watch out and run away, pointing out that the danger went in a certain direction. Fear flashes in the princess's eyes as she processes the warning, realizing the threat is near. 5 years ago, in the Demon Lord's autonomous territory, the Demon Lord urgently commands the hero of the Divine Sword to suppress the rebellion led by the Demon Grand Duke and his faction. The hero reacts quietly, caught off guard by the demand. The Demon Lord explains that some still cling to demon pride and try to force everything through power. She reveals intelligence that the most radical faction of the Doran's Demon Grand Duke is planning a riot. She implores the hero to prevent it before it starts. The hero questions if it wouldn't be better for the Demon Lord herself to handle the dispute among demons directly. The Demon Lord, Yami Onyankapan-sama, sits formally with hands clasped, listening intently. The hero expresses doubt, noting that a Demon Lord coexisting with a hero should have enough power to counter such threats. The Demon Lord responds with a smirk, while the hero admits he would rather avoid unnecessary bloodshed if possible. The hero questions if the Demon Lord side should be the one saying this, while the Demon Lord appears unbothered. The Demon Lord contemplates that she could stop the rebellion herself, but forcibly subduing her direct subordinates might provoke more resentment and lead to further uprisings. She worries innocent bystanders would suffer unnecessary bloodshed and insists she is not one of those old-fashioned demons who believe in suppressing others through force. She declares she prefers to handle things properly by earning money and using it to keep the radicals quiet, asserting that in this day and age, money equates to justice. The hero quietly acknowledges the importance of money. She reveals she already has permission from the Great Temple of the Holy Faith, but the hero protests that such decisions can't be made alone. She insists showing the overwhelming power of the Divine Sword hero will calm the radicals, as they don't yet understand his true strength. The Demon Lord reminds the hero that those with power bear responsibility and asks if it isn't time for him to use his power correctly. The hero looks down at his hands, quietly murmuring about his power. The hero reflects silently, while a distant figure asks what he wishes to achieve with his power. He clenches his fists, then nods firmly as the Demon Lord looks on, saying she understands. The hero declares he will wield his sword if his power can help everyone live peacefully. The Demon Lord beams, praising the spirit of the Divine Sword hero. She entrusts him with dealing quietly and discreetly with the Demon Grand Duke's faction, emphasizing it as a state secret. The hero, hoping this will be the last time, accepts the responsibility with a calm resolve. The Demon Lord, worried this won't happen often, urges the hero to spend the rest of his life with her. Surprised, he questions the sudden proposal. She imagines a future where their alliance makes them unstoppable, building a more peaceful world together. The hero declines, fearing demons would resent her for siding with him. She finds this boring but asks for his help sorting paperwork. He nervously agrees, relieved when she asks if he can use an abacus. She complains her subordinates are muscleheads who can't use an abacus. Tossing one to him, the hero reflects that everyone's idea of a state secret is arbitrary as he begins calculating with the abacus. 1 year ago in the royal capital, a young man and woman are startled by a commotion outside. The young man wonders what is happening as the woman notes the noise. A maid rushes in, urgently addressing the young man as young master. The maid explains that a behemoth from the sideshow has escaped, causing alarm. The young man reacts with shock while the maid warns that if they don't act quickly, people could be hurt. The woman adds that the anti-monster security squad is being called, but they probably won't arrive in time. The young man, the woman, and the maid stand silently, contemplating the situation, resolving to act. The young man declares he has no choice but to go stop the behemoth. He sighs, preparing himself for the task ahead. The young man asks the maid Elena to explain the situation to the sideshow owner. Elena waves goodbye, wishing him luck. The young man recalls that it has been a while since his brother-in-law summoned the divine sword, not since he suppressed the Doran's Grand Duke's rebellion. A maid urgently calls out to Princess Rosaline, guiding her quickly through narrow streets. The princess responds with a hurried yes, as they rush forward. Suddenly, the princess is warned to watch out and run away, her eyes wide with alarm as she turns to face the approaching danger. He asks if she is injured, his concern immediate. She recognizes him, surprised and breathless. Outside a grand building. He calls her by name, warmly inviting her inside with a bouquet. Inside, a man praises the hero for saving people with the divine sword, urging him not to be modest. The hero apologizes for causing trouble for Princess Rosaline, showing his humility despite the praise. They discuss false gossip magazines that exaggerated the incident, making it bigger than the behemoth subjugation. The man announces Roland's visit to Rosaline, who reacts with joyful surprise. Rosaline, surrounded by framed pictures of Roland, beams with happiness, confessing she has been wanting to see him. Roland, caught off guard, nervously reacts to her heartfelt words. A man reflects on how Rosaline became infatuated with Roland, hoping the day Roland would become his brother-in-law was near. Another man responds with concern as two swordsmen duel in an arena. He reveals Rosaline fell ill after that, and the other acknowledges the news is worrying. They look toward a window where Rosaline appears, but a voice explains that although she seems fine, doctors and her father say she cannot receive visitors. The man asks if a decision has been made, smiling confidently. The scene shifts to the tournament arena where Roland claims his 4th consecutive victory, earning the title of absolute champion. The man praises Roland's excellent performance and expresses pride in him as his right-hand man. Back inside, the man tells Dominic that despite being excellent, his sword skills need improvement. Dominic apologizes, and the man laughs, saying those with power have the right to display it. Dominic quietly agrees, accepting the critique. He sighs, wishing to stop entering tournaments soon despite it being His Highness's wish. He reflects on the obvious power gap that always leads to his victories and how he's embarrassed by the nicknames he's earned. The tournament winner, Roland, stands proudly on the podium as the absolute champion, with a man boasting about how His Highness only wants to show off how excellent his attendant is. Roland is congratulated on his victory by a serious man, who calls him Dominic. Roland nervously thanks him and asks that he stop calling him that title. The man says His Highness was very pleased, praising his right-hand man as excellent. Roland, a bit embarrassed, responds that it's good to hear. The man wonders aloud if he had been born with overwhelming power beyond ordinary people. Roland is surprised by the question. The man then tells Dominic that His Highness is waiting and urges him to go quickly, addressing him as the hero of the divine sword. Roland contemplates that although his power is something he was born with, having power is quite challenging in its own way, as he clutches his shirt thoughtfully. 3 small gnome-like house fairies rush through a hallway, greeting a young woman named Edith with a cheerful "Good morning, Miss Edith." Edith, walking in the garden, turns her head in surprise at their greeting. Edith explains she was in the garden greeting the black demon dog. The house fairies laugh, recalling how Edith once sang with a small fairy while taming the fierce black demon dog, a creature said to kill anyone who looks at it. Edith smiles warmly as she talks about her daily explorations, explaining the academy is filled with historical and legendary artifacts, making it a precious place where harmless wild monsters and small fairies occasionally appear. She notes the house fairies are up early too, and since there are more morning classes, they clean earlier. She expresses gratitude for the house fairies who clean the academy every day. Standing with the house fairies on a staircase, Edith is praised as a good girl. One fairy remarks that most rich folks are stuck up, but Edith and perhaps the Oriole family are the only ones who respect them. Edith's expression shifts to curiosity as she hears the name Oriole family, catching the attention of the house fairies who look up with questioning expressions. A young woman kneels on the stairs, puzzled by an unfamiliar object. A small fairy asks what's wrong, but she admits she might be seeing it for the first time and decides to collect it just in case. She insists it's a misunderstanding to Edward Sama. Nearby students protest, insisting they didn't push someone down and claim it's a mistake. A sharp young man loudly condemns the scene as unsightly, drawing attention from others around. A stern man accuses the kneeling woman of being at the scene yesterday and running away, demanding she admit her crime. She pleads innocence, explaining a black mass suddenly fell at that time. The man warns she'll receive proper punishment if she keeps making excuses before His Highness. Another woman anxiously calls out to Dominic Sama, asking what he intends to do with them. The woman reflects on how rude the princes are, noting they never greeted them and that the man who just left was her fiancé. The house fairies suggest she reconsider her marriage partner, shocked that he ignored his fiancé. A young man and woman arrive at the school, noticing the noisy commotion. The boy wonders if something has happened. Suddenly, a girl with flowing hair passes by swiftly, catching the girl's surprised gaze. A cheerful girl calls out to Edith Sama, greeting her warmly. Edith returns the greeting politely. The young man focuses intently on Edith, recognizing her as the daughter of the Lost Bell department store owner and fiancée of Dominic. He asks Renee if that is indeed the person. The young man introduces himself as Roland Valerie Oriole and says his sister-in-law is always in Edith's care. Renee blushes. Delighted that Edith listens to her stories, Edith thanks Roland, explaining that at Lost Bell department store, Edith is very studious and knowledgeable about monsters and mythical beasts. Roland remarks that meeting dragons and demon lords in person can change one's impression of them. Edith excitedly asks if Roland has actually met these beings, praising him as the hero of the divine sword. Roland confirms, noting Edith's love for monsters and mythical beasts. Another woman reflects that Edith's interest in these creatures surpasses any romantic feelings for the young Master Dominic. She forgives Edith, calling her intelligent and wonderful. Edith blushes when asked about Dominic, quickly denying anything. The woman admires Dominic, calling him a nice person. Renee nervously asks if everyone knows about the incident from yesterday. She gasps, realizing Dominic is present, and stammers his name. Roland and another woman ask what happened, curious about the incident. Renee explains that Baroness Crystal apparently fell down the stairs yesterday afternoon. Roland and Renee exchange worried looks as she admits she doesn't know the details but wonders if the Baroness is alright after her injuries. She reveals that Adrian Sama's friends, who were at the scene, were taken away by Prince Edward as the culprits who pushed Crystal Sama. The group, including Roland and two women, react with shock and disbelief, shouting in surprise at this revelation. Animal hair occasionally appears around the academy grounds, but this is the first time such hair and scales have been found. The maid notes the scales resemble those of the Cerberus they recently fought, though smaller. Even the Brownie House fairies who witnessed the collection have never seen anything like it. Renee blushes, proud to be a maid who has fought magical beasts. She apologizes for going off topic, and another girl suggests telling Elena about it later. Renee agrees, admitting the matter isn't very important. She insists these traces are from some kind of magical beast, while recalling that harmless magical creatures sometimes appear around the academy. Roland coughs nervously, pondering the connection between the fall accident and the traces of an unknown magical beast. Roland commands Miss Lospel to uncover the true identity of the hair and scales. She eagerly agrees, promising to research in the academy library. Roland urges her to act quickly, then adds that there are urgent matters for Renee and Elena to handle. Roland's expression hardens as he demands action, but his tone shifts sharply when he scolds someone for intimidating women in an inappropriate place, declaring it ungentlemanly behavior and silencing any objections. A young woman urgently calls out to a man descending a grand staircase, addressing him as Your Highness Edward. The man turns slightly, acknowledging her with a serious expression. The vast, ornate hall is filled with several onlookers watching the exchange unfold. Edward is greeted warmly by a cheerful young man named Roland, who asks why he took so long. Edward seems surprised and confused, asking if Roland received a message from Dominic. Roland responds with a sharp "T," hinting at frustration or annoyance. Meanwhile, another young man named Renee looks on, puzzled, and quietly questions Dominic. He reflects silently, realizing that Dominic deliberately did not contact him. He then cheerfully apologizes for his tardiness, explaining there was a miscommunication. Roland, with a confident grin, declares he was about to expose the misdeeds of some women and welcomes Edward's timely arrival. Renee listens, sweat forming on his brow as the tension rises. The woman who initially called Edward glares at him intensely, her expression sharp and accusing. She wonders aloud what Edward came to do by arriving late and alone. Clearly displeased, Edward and Roland exchange uneasy glances, while Renee internally acknowledges the woman's fierce glare and suspects she is Edward's loyal attendant, feeling the weight of her scrutiny. The young man firmly promises that he will not allow anything bad to happen, his determination clear. Despite the girl's irritated glare, he reassures her with a confident smile, declaring that he is on her side. The group stands outside a grand building, tension thick in the air as one declares they are completely behind schedule. A young man remains silent, sweat forming as a woman confirms the delay. Another girl solemnly reveals that according to Elena, Lady Constance has warned her she will no longer hesitate to directly harm Crystal. The young man reflects on the shocking speed of Lady Constance's actions and the crude method used. Pushing someone down the stairs, the two women question why His Highness Edward never contacted the young master's right-hand man. A confident young man named Roland proudly holds up evidence, revealing he's searching for proof that Adrian is framing Crystal. The young man explains that Lord Dominic was present but left without acknowledging him. He sought someone to mediate and sent a servant with a message to Lady Adrian, but she was already informed. Realizing the urgency, he resolves to join the others quickly. A dark figure watches from behind curtains, ominously predicting that according to Second Prince Jeremy's scheme, the couple will break up in the worst possible way within half a year. The scene shifts to the determined faces of the couple, foreshadowing the turmoil ahead. A young man commands Adrian to quietly hand over the two frightened women. His voice sharp and urgent, Adrian stands firm. Her expression resolute as the young man's stern gaze meets hers. The two women cling to each other, startled and fearful. Adrian calmly asks what crime her friends have committed, her voice steady despite the tension. She insists it's all right, challenging the accusation. The young man accuses her of ordering the harassment of Baroness Crystal and the incident of pushing her down the stairs, demanding she admit to it. Adrian denies any knowledge, her glare unwavering. Adrian questions who Lady Crystal is and her connection to the young man. Refusing to accept the accusations, she challenges why they would harass someone they barely know, demanding an explanation. The young man's frustration boils over as he calls her a wicked woman, unable to hide his anger. Nearby, a group of students watches the confrontation anxiously, noting how much attention they're drawing. One suggests asking Lord Dominic to mediate and clear up the misunderstanding. The young man contemplates the idea, while another reflects on Adrienne's indifference to her fiancé's infatuation with Lady Crystal, suspecting she might not be interested in Dominic at all. A woman suggests killing them all, but another warns not to give up. A young man considers collapsing the stairs from a blind spot to make it look like an accident and destroy the evidence. He reflects that Lady Constance was spreading false information accusing Adrian of harassing Crystal, making it natural to suspect Lady Constance orchestrated the incident to prove Adrienne's innocence. He thinks they must find the true cause of Lady Crystal's fall, unrelated to Adrian. The woman suddenly remembers and reveals she collected something at the scene of the stairs that morning. She shows a small vial, asking if it might be related to the incident. Animal hair is sometimes found around the academy grounds, but this is the first time such hair and scales have been discovered. The maid who collected it recalls that even the brownie house fairies present at the scene had never seen anything like it. The size differs, but it resembles the hair and tail scales of the Cerberus they recently fought. The maid's experience fighting magical beasts is acknowledged with surprise. Elena admits she's gone off topic and is asked to explain later. She agrees, noting these traces might be from some kind of magical beast. The girl explains harmless magical creatures occasionally appear around the academy. Though it's not a big deal, the young man reflects on the fall accident and traces of an unknown magical beast, swallowing nervously. The young man urgently asks Miss Losbell to uncover the true identity of the hair and scales. She agrees eagerly, promising to research it in the academy library. He stresses the urgency and mentions other pressing matters for Renee and Elena to handle. The young man vows to act in the meantime but is cut off by a stern voice condemning intimidation of women in inappropriate places as ungentlemanly behavior. The man demands silence, refusing to hear any opinion, while two women watch the confrontation from a distance. A young woman urgently calls out to a young man, addressing him as Your Highness Edward. He stands at the bottom of a grand staircase, looking up at her and a group of others gathered on the upper landing. Edward greets a young man named Roland with a smile, asking why he took so long. Roland appears confused, not having received Dominic's message. Another young man reacts with frustration, while Edward and Roland exchange surprised looks over the mention of Dominic. He realizes Dominic deliberately avoided contacting him. Roland apologizes for his late arrival, explaining a miscommunication. Edward confidently declares he was about to expose the misdeeds of some women, welcoming Roland's timely arrival. The young woman who first called out glares intensely at Edward and Roland, questioning why Edward arrived late and alone. She thinks to herself that Edward is being glaringly watched. Realizing he is the yes-man attendant to His Highness, Edward looks irritated and overwhelmed by the woman's fierce gaze. A young woman clenches her fists in frustration, her glare sharp and intense. The young man before her pledges firmly that he will not allow anything bad to happen, his eyes shining with determination. He assures her that he is on her side, his resolve unwavering despite the tension between them.